They laughed when an 18-year-old bought a $20 Quonset hut in the mountains. They had no idea that inside, secrets decades old would teach him survival, patience, and a wisdom that would change his life forever. Before we start, join our YouTube family by subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to like this video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, let's get into the story. The 18-year-old boy had nowhere to go. He had been living on the streets for months. Nights were cold and long. He slept under bridges and in empty alleys. His stomach often ached from hunger. He had nothing but the clothes on his back and a small backpack. One morning, he wandered into the mountains. The wind was sharp. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. Sunlight filtered through the trees in thin streaks. He walked without direction. Every step was heavy. His feet were sore. His mind was restless. He did not know what he would find. After hours of walking, he noticed a small metal Quonset hut. It sat quietly among the rocks. Its roof was rusty. The walls were dented. The door hung crooked on its hinges. A small sign leaned against a stone. It said for sale, $20. He laughed quietly. $20. That was all he had. He stepped closer. The ground around the hut was dry. Small stones and sparse grass surrounded it. He saw no smoke, no signs of life. He reached for the door. It creaked loudly as he pushed it open. Dust rose in the air. The smell of old metal and earth hit him. Broken furniture leaned against the walls. A thin mattress lay on the floor. The hut was dark. A pale stream of light came through a small window. He noticed scratches on the wooden floor. They looked deliberate. They formed lines and shapes. He knelt down. He traced them with his fingers. At first, they made no sense. Then he realized they looked like coordinates or measurements. They could be directions. He studied the lines carefully. Every mark seemed deliberate. He stood and looked around the hut. He moved a pile of old blankets. Beneath them, he found a small metal box. It was locked, but light enough to lift. He carried it outside to the sunlight. He tried to pry it open with a rock. The lid creaked. He managed to lift it. Inside were yellowed papers, a small notebook, and a hand-cranked map projector. He opened the notebook. The handwriting was careful. Each page had diagrams of tunnels. The tunnels ran beneath the mountain. Notes described hidden springs and underground water channels. The papers mentioned a cistern. It could supply water to anyone who knew how to access it. His stomach tightened. This was no ordinary find. Someone had documented something important. The hut was more than a shelter. It was a key to survival. He spent hours examining the projector. He placed it on a flat rock. He turned the crank. A map projected onto the rock. The lines and tunnels made sense in light. He studied the measurements carefully. The underground system was extensive. It was clear the knowledge had been meant for careful use. He realized the tunnels could provide water and shelter. His hope grew. After weeks of wandering and surviving on scraps, he finally saw a way to secure his own safety. The sun dipped toward the horizon. Shadows stretched across the hut. He packed the notebook and projector in his backpack. He gathered blankets and stacked them neatly. Dust particles floated in the sunlight. He felt a small sense of pride. He had found something that could change his life. The wind blew through the cracks in the walls. He heard the distant sound of a stream. Birds flew across the sky. He decided to stay in the hut for the night. He laid out the blankets. The metal roof creaked in the wind. The temperature dropped quickly. He wrapped himself tightly. Sleep came in short bursts. Every sound made him wake. A coyote howled in the distance. Small animals rustled in the underbrush. He imagined the tunnels below. He imagined the water flowing silently. He felt a thrill. The hut had given him shelter. It had given him a path forward. At dawn, he rose. The first rays of sunlight hit the hut. Dust sparkled in the air. He opened the door and stepped outside. The mountain air was crisp. He looked across the valley. Trails, rocks, and trees moved slightly in the morning wind. He felt a mixture of fear and excitement. The tunnels awaited. The secret of the cistern was his to uncover. He checked the notebook again. The lines matched the terrain. Every detail mattered. One wrong step could make the tunnels dangerous. He packed essentials: water bottle, rope, lantern, notebook. He approached the first coordinates marked in the notebook. The rocks were rough under his boots. Small animals watched from the underbrush. He crouched to examine the entrance. It was narrow and steep. He gripped the rope. He looked back at the hut and nodded. He was ready. The morning sun climbed higher. Dust swirled around the tunnel entrance. Water could be heard faintly in the distance beneath the rocks. He felt a thrill. The notebook had not been a mistake. Someone had placed this knowledge carefully. He took a deep breath. He gripped his rope and began his descent. The cold air rushed around him. Every step mattered. Every movement was careful. He descended into the unknown. He was not just exploring, he was discovering a life that had been hidden for decades. His mind raced with possibilities. Water flowing through tunnels. Surviving and thriving in the mountains. Pride in understanding a system that had been forgotten. He focused on every sound. Drip of water. Crack of rock. Rustle of animals. The tunnels were alive in a quiet way. His heart beat faster with each step. He felt connected to the mountain. Observation and patience mattered. Discovery was about respect. The entrance widened. Darkness stretched ahead. Light from outside faded. The weight of history pressed down. The hut had been empty for decades. The tunnels sealed. Now he was inside. The notebook guided him. The projector revealed the paths. Awe and excitement filled him. This was bigger than shelter. This was survival and knowledge intertwined. He gripped the rope and stepped forward. He moved slowly. Footsteps echoed. Water dripped from the ceiling. Stone walls were cold and damp. He followed the sketches carefully. Each turn led to another. The cistern was somewhere ahead. Air grew cooler. A faint smell of earth and water grew stronger. He paused and listened. Tunnels were silent except for his breathing and dripping water. He felt alive and focused. Ready to uncover the secret the hut had hidden for decades. He stopped at a bend. The tunnel split into two. He checked the notebook. One path led to small streams. The other led to the main cistern. He chose the main path. Heart beat faster. This was the moment the notebook had prepared him for. Every measurement, every sketch, every note mattered. The hut, the mountain, and the secret system guided him. He paused. Outside the hut, the metal walls reflected the sunlight. Small and forgotten, but full of hidden knowledge. He smiled faintly. He adjusted his backpack, stepped forward. The cistern awaited. The hut had given him shelter. The mountain had given him purpose. He felt ready. Hook. Tomorrow, he would reach the hidden cistern and discover a secret that could change his life forever. The 18-year-old boy moved carefully through the tunnel. Water dripped from the ceiling and pooled in small spots on the stone floor. The walls were damp and cold to the touch. He held the rope tightly in his hands. Every step made his heart beat faster. The sketches in the notebook guided him. Each turn and angle matched the measurements he had studied. He paused often. He listened. Water flowed somewhere below. The echo of his footsteps and the drip of water filled the silence. He knew the cistern was close, but he could not rush. One wrong step could be dangerous. The tunnel narrowed in places. He had to crawl low over rough rocks. Dust and dirt filled his nostrils. He smelled the faint scent of earth and water. His legs ached from the constant bending. He moved slowly. He traced the walls with his hands to keep balance. Small animals scurried in the distance. Their presence reminded him the mountain was alive. He focused on the path ahead. The notebook had described this exact layout. The measurements were precise. He knew he was on the right track. After a long crawl, the tunnel widened. He stood up. He saw a small pool of clear water in a depression in the floor. He knelt and touched it. The water was cold but clean. His reflection shimmered in it. He drank a small amount and felt revived. His stomach no longer ached as much. He looked around. The walls were lined with older stonework. Some stones were loose. Others were firmly in place. He examined the ceiling. It was solid. The The tunnel had been built carefully. Someone had spent months constructing this. Someone had thought about water and survival. He continued forward. Light grew faintly ahead. The tunnel led to a metal gate. Rust covered the edges, but it was intact. He pushed slowly. The hinges groaned. Dust rose in the air. He looked behind him. The path was narrow and dangerous. He took a deep breath. He could feel his heartbeat in his ears. He pushed harder. The gate moved slightly. He placed his shoulder against it and leaned. It gave way with a loud creak. He stepped inside. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Water flowed here in small channels. The cistern was beyond. The smell of water was stronger. The walls were lined with stone blocks. They were old, but sturdy. The ceiling rose higher. He could see where the tunnel had been carved carefully. Someone had thought about every detail. The boy examined the floor. Marks showed that tools had been used to guide the flow of water. He followed the flow. The cistern was massive. Clear water reflected the lantern light. It was deep and wide, enough to supply the hut and surrounding areas for months. He knelt and touched it. The water was cool and pure. He sat for a while. His legs ached. His hands were scraped. But he felt accomplishment. He had discovered something no one else had used in decades. This was survival. This was knowledge. He realized the notebook had been a guide for those who respected the mountain. The cistern was not just water. It was a lesson in observation and patience. He traced the channels with his fingers. He studied the way the water moved. Each flow was deliberate. Each path mattered. He could see why the system had worked. He could see how to maintain it. The boy explored the chamber. Small creatures moved in the shadows. Bats hung from the ceiling. The sound of dripping water echoed around. He studied the walls carefully. Every stone was in place. Every crack mattered. The tunnels had been sealed to protect the water. He understood the purpose. This was survival knowledge meant for careful hands. He felt a sense of responsibility. He was no longer a boy wandering aimlessly. He had purpose. He had a mission. He spent hours examining the cistern. He tested the flow of water. He marked notes in his own notebook. He adjusted some small channels to improve flow. The system worked perfectly. He smiled. This was a hidden treasure, not of gold, but of life. Clean water in the mountain was priceless. He imagined what it would mean if he could use it safely. He thought about the hut. It was small and forgotten, but held the path to discovery. He felt gratitude for finding it. The sun outside began to rise higher. Light filtered through the cracks of the metal hut above. He paused. He realized how lucky he was. He had survived on scraps. Now he had a base. Now he had water. He felt a sense of peace he had not known for months. He reflected on his journey. The streets had been harsh. Hunger and cold had been constant. But now he had found a place that could sustain him. The mountain had given him a challenge. He had met it. He had overcome it. The boy explored the smaller channels, connecting to the main cistern. He traced each path. Water flowed steadily. Some channels were clogged with debris. He cleared them carefully. He documented everything. His notebook filled with notes. He realized he had become a caretaker. The knowledge he had found was meant to be preserved. He was the guardian of the secret now. He felt pride, but also responsibility. One careless mistake could ruin it. The chamber was quiet, except for water and his breathing. He paused to rest. The air was cool and fresh. Small animals moved in distant shadows. He listened. He understood the rhythm of the mountain. He understood patience and attention. Each drip of water reminded him that life depended on small details. He had learned that survival was not only strength, but also observation and intelligence. After some time, he returned toward the hut. He felt accomplished. He had explored the tunnels. He had discovered the cistern. He had tested the water flow. The system worked. He carried some water in a small container back to the hut. He examined the hut again. Dust covered the floor. Broken furniture leaned in corners, but it was now more than shelter. It was a command center. It was a base for survival. He cleaned a small area for cooking. He set up blankets and arranged his supplies. He prepared to stay. As the sun dipped toward evening, he paused outside. The mountain air was crisp. Birds flew across the valley. Deer moved slowly in the distance. Rabbits darted through the grass. A fox appeared briefly and disappeared into the underbrush. He felt connected to the world. He realized the mountain was alive. The cistern was alive in a quiet way. He smiled. He understood the balance. The hut and tunnels were part of the ecosystem. Respect was essential. He felt at peace. The boy settled in for the night. He laid out blankets and lanterns. He wrote in his notebook. He reflected on his day. He had been homeless. Now he had found shelter, water, and purpose. The metal hut was small but powerful in meaning. The mountain was challenging but rewarding. He drifted to sleep, thinking of the cistern, the tunnels, and the lessons he had learned. He knew tomorrow would bring more discovery and understanding. Tomorrow he would explore deeper connections of the mountain system and uncover details that could secure his survival forever. The 18-year-old boy stepped out of the small Quonset hut into the crisp morning air. Sunlight spilled across the mountains. Shadows of trees stretched across the ground. The hut behind him looked quiet and abandoned, but it had given him answers he could not have imagined. He had examined the old mechanical tools and the notebooks full of sketches. Every item told a story of someone who had lived and worked here decades ago. He felt a connection to the unknown person who had left the hut. He looked around the valley. Birds flew low over the mountain slopes. Deer grazed in the distance. The wind carried the scent of pine and dry grass. He felt calm and alert at the same time. The hut had shown him that survival was not only about food or shelter, but about understanding your environment. Each small discovery mattered. He realized he had learned patience. He had learned observation. He had learned to value small details that most people overlooked. He returned to the hut to organize what he had found. Old tools were cleaned and arranged. Sketches were carefully stacked. He traced the lines in the notebooks. Some led to hidden caches in the mountain. He decided to map them out for himself. The boy understood that he could not take everything at once. The mountain was vast, and each secret required careful attention. He wanted to document it all. Each note and tool was important. They represented knowledge and survival skills passed down by someone who had thought ahead. As the day progressed, he explored the area around the hut. Rocks and fallen trees provided natural clues. He noticed faint marks in the soil. They seemed deliberate. Following them led him to small piles of old wood and stone. Each pile contained something useful: a rusted compass, a carved wooden box, a notebook with observations about the mountain trails and local wildlife. He realized the original inhabitant had spent years learning the mountain. Everything was methodical. Nothing was random. He felt awe for the careful planning and intelligence of the person who had once lived here. He spent hours tracing the paths around the hut. He marked points in his notebook. He checked the sketches he had copied earlier. Everything connected. The hut was like a central hub for survival in this remote area. He understood the logic behind the layout. Supplies and tools were placed strategically. The hut's entrance allowed surveillance of the valley. Natural barriers provided security. Observation points gave a view of wildlife movements. He felt respect for the design. He felt motivated to continue learning. By evening, he had mapped several hidden spots and organized the hut for overnight stay. He built a small fire outside. Smoke spiraled into the sky. He cooked simple food he had carried. Sitting by the fire, he thought about the mountain. It had been harsh at first. Cold nights and hunger had tested him. The hut had given him shelter. The notebooks and tools had given him knowledge. Now he felt empowered. He could survive. He could explore safely. The mountain had taught him lessons about observation and patience that he could not have learned anywhere else. As night fell, he looked up at the stars. The sky was clear and bright. He could see constellations he had never noticed before. The wind whispered through the trees. He felt calm. He thought about what he would do tomorrow. He would continue to explore. He would document the paths and hidden spots. He would learn from the mountains, just as the previous inhabitant had learned. He realized he had changed. He was no longer wandering aimlessly. He had purpose. He had curiosity. He had courage. He drifted to sleep, wrapped in blankets inside the hut. The fire outside crackled softly. Shadows danced on the walls. He dreamed of the mountain and its secrets. Every discovery had built confidence in him. Every observation had taught him something new. The hut was no longer just a place to stay. It was a teacher. It was a guide. It had shown him how to pay attention and value knowledge. He felt gratitude for this unlikely gift. The next morning, he awoke early. The sun was rising. Light streamed through the small window. He planned to explore a narrow trail marked in the notebook. This path had never been visited for decades. The sketches suggested it led to a lookout point and a small natural cave. He prepared his pack carefully. Tools, notebook, and supplies were arranged. Every item had its place. He moved quietly through the valley. Birds took flight as he passed. A fox watched from the underbrush and disappeared silently. He felt connected to the mountain in a way he had never felt before. At the lookout, he paused. The view was breathtaking. The valley stretched endlessly. Rocks, trees, and streams created patterns that were both beautiful and practical. He noticed subtle signs of wildlife and weather. Footprints in mud, scratches on bark, broken twigs along trails. He realized the original inhabitant had learned to survive. By noticing these same signs, he studied the markings carefully. They gave him insight into movement, direction, and the natural balance of the mountain. He moved to the cave indicated in the sketches. The entrance was small and hidden behind rocks. Inside, he found additional notebooks and tools. Some were practical. Some contained observations about wildlife and seasons. He sat and studied them. Each page contained wisdom. Every sketch revealed careful attention to detail. He understood how to use these notes to continue surviving. He realized the mountain had a rhythm. Observing it was as important as finding food or shelter. Knowledge was survival. He spent several days exploring and documenting. Every discovery added to his understanding. He mapped trails, identified safe resting spots, and noted the movements of animals. The mountain became a teacher. The hut remained a base. He realized the gift of this place was not material. It was wisdom. It was method. It was learning to see what others missed. He felt a sense of accomplishment. The loneliness of being homeless had been replaced with purpose. The mountains had given him confidence. Finally, he returned to the hut one evening. The sun dipped low. Shadows stretched long. He looked at the mountains with respect and gratitude. The tools, notebooks, and hidden paths had changed him. He had survived. He had learned. He had grown. The hut had given him shelter. The mountain had given him understanding. He realized that sometimes the smallest discoveries could lead to the greatest change. He had started with nothing. Now he had knowledge, purpose, and hope. He stepped outside the hut one last time and took a deep breath. The wind whispered through the trees. He felt alive and ready for whatever came next. The secrets of the mountain were his, to respect and protect. He knew he could thrive here because he had learned to observe, think, and move with care. The mountain was no longer a place of fear, but a place of discovery and possibility. Hook, the 18-year-old boy, had found more than shelter. He had found a life built on curiosity, patience, and understanding that would guide him forever.